Okay, George, I'll send this to you once we are all done.
All
Um,
right.
what you're all experiencing with a cat and dog theology is in, I don't know if you want to say more theological terms, is a people-centered theology versus a God-centered theology. A people-centered theology, again, basically says everything revolves around us. We are at the center of the universe. God lives for us. The Bible is all about us. Look at what God has done for us. Therefore, it's all about us. And that is the key to the people centered theology. And that is the key to cat theology. That is what cat theology is all about. What has God done with us? So we open up the pages of our Bible and we ask one simple question: what's in this for me? What do I get when I get saved? What do I get when I go to heaven? What kind of miracles does God want to do for me? And we read the Bible with that kind of perspective instead of the other perspective, a God centered theology or dog theology, which basically says, what does God get out of this? What does God get out of us going to heaven? What does God get out of doing miracles in our lives? What does God get when we get saved? On and on and on. It asks the question, what does God get? And it really changes your entire Christianity. As many of you are already finding out, and many of you are already realizing, I'm a big part cat. If you were to ask my wife, is your husband any part cat? She would laugh and say, absolutely yes. We are all part cat. My secretary, who is listening, calls this catitudes. We all have catitudes because we're all struggling with the old nature that's inside of us. And so that's what we began to go over last week was the dangers of catitudes, the dangers of living for ourselves. And that's when we brought out all of those things. Cats have selective listening, reading, hearing, things like that. And they use their Bible like the refrigerator. They take out what they want and they leave in what they don't want. And that's what happens many times. I did not get to cover a key, really, scripture last week. And so I want to go over that this week. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to be sharing my screen. Thankfully, I was able to call it up. And in so doing, we're going to go over what's called the prodigal sons. The prodigal sons. Now, Diana, what's different about that slide that you see? What do we normally think of when we go to Luke chapter 15 about the prodigal? What do we call it?
The prodigal son, not sons.
Yes, the prodigal son, singular. But a gentleman, why do I have to admit Felix? The gentleman who was a pastor in New York wrote a book called The Prodigal Sons. And so we're going to find out that both sons were both prodigal. One son was prodigal outside the church. And George, what do you think the other prodigal son was? What's the key word? If one was prodigal outside the church, the other son is prodigal what?
In the church.
Inside the church. So what this is going to try to tell us is that we can be going to church every Sunday, doing everything we're supposed to do, and we're still far away from God. We're still prodigals in God's eyes. We've distanced ourselves from not relationship, but from fellowship. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. The prodigal sons. We find it in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 and 12. There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." Again, George, I assume you and they already have this PowerPoint, right? Because I sent it to you last week.
This for the prodigal son.
Yes, this was in last week's PowerPoint, but we didn't cover it.
Okay.
So
we don't have it yet. I haven't shared it yet.
Okay. So
I shared the recording.
Yeah, so George has it, but this is already in your PowerPoint, so I won't be sending it again, but it is there. So what this talk does is it shows that everything the prodigal son, whom we normally call the prodigal son, this young man who said, "Give me my share of the estate," everything he did to his father, the other son did to his father, but he just happened to do it in a different way. So we're going to first start looking at the prodigal son himself, the one who went away and left everything. So verse 11, Luke chapter 15, verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.'" Now, what he was talking about was his inheritance. So the older son got 2/3 of the inheritance. The younger son would get 1/3 of his share of the inheritance. That's just the way it was set up in the Israelite culture, the Hebrew culture. The older one got a greater percentage of the inheritance. I don't know what it's like there in Kenya, but in America, when my parents died, I and my 3 siblings, so 4 of us, we all got 25% of the pie. It was all equal. There was no greater percentage to the older son or older daughter. Everybody got 25%, an equal share. But that's not the way it is here with this prodigal son. The older one, who was not saying, "Give me my share," he would get 2/3. The younger one got 1/3. And this was, that's what would have happened after their father had died. And basically, sorry, the text isn't showing up. I don't know why, but here's what the younger son was basically saying. Because the inheritance would come after their father died, the younger one is basically communicating non-verbally, "I want you dead. I want you dead. I don't want you."
Is it on my side only?
Huh? I'm sorry, George.
The screen recording.
I didn't understand you either, Diana. I'm sorry. What did you say?
The internet is quite slow on your side. The screen is still loading right now.
I am so sorry. What do you see now?
It's still loading, so I don't know if it's me only. Maybe the rest can say if they can see anything.
Looks like George just died. Can anybody else see the screen?
Yes, I'm able to see mine. It's back.
Okay. All right. Well, let's continue on. This is we'll have the audio recording, and you can, if you want, hopefully you will take the audio recording and go through with the PowerPoint if you need it. If you didn't understand something, you can go back to the PowerPoint. But we're looking at verse 11, where the son basically says, "I want my inheritance now," which again, the inheritance came after the father was supposed to be dead. Therefore, he is non-verbally communicating, "Dad, I want you dead. I want nothing to do with you." And so the prodigal son wanted to be in control of his inheritance. He wanted to be in control of whatever was going to happen to him for all of eternity. And so that's non-verbally what he was saying. And he was also communicating that he was very displeased with his father. He was displeased with his father. And he privately disrespects his father. So he went to the father one-on-one privately, and he disrespects his father, saying, "I want my inheritance now." And so we got to verse 11 and 12 again. He says, "Father, give me my share of the estate." And so it then says, so he, the father, divided his property between them. He divided his property between them. So the father divided his property between them. Now, you need to understand, he did not go to the bank and take a withdrawal out of the bank that he was banking with. They did not have banks back in those times. What he was basically doing was he was taking his property, putting up a for sale sign, and he sold his property, a good chunk of his property, for his younger son. So he sold probably a third of it off for his younger son. And you had to assume that there were rumors going on in the community. Why is he selling a third of his property? And so this was a public humiliation. So not only did the prodigal son privately disrespect his father, but he publicly humiliates his father. He publicly humiliates his father. That's because the father had to sell off a third of his land. He had to put up the for sale sign, and people said, what is going on? And they knew that the son had left, and so they realized he sold his property to give his son his inheritance. It was a public humiliation. Verse 13. Not long after that, the youngest son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. So his heart was set on worldly things. His heart was not at all engaged in his father. He didn't want to be in relationship with his father, but his heart was set on worldly things, and he's rebelling against his father. He's not obeying his father. He's rebelling against him, wanting him dead, and he is alienated from his father. So there's a gap. There's a distance between his father. Now, and finally, he's focused on himself. He's focused on himself. These are the key things that are going on among the prodigal son. He wanted to be in control. He is displeased with his father. He privately disrespects his father. He publicly humiliates his father. His heart is set on worldly things. He rebels against his father. He's alienated from the father, and he's focused only on himself. So this is what is going on with the prodigal son. So let's keep seeing what else goes. The prodigal son eventually does repent. Now, when he repents, I want to stop here for a second. Any one of you can unmute yourself to answer this question. Is this prodigal son a non-Christian? Yes or no? Don't everybody share at once.
No. No.
Very good. This is a believer. In Luke chapter 15, men and women, so many pastors miss it. The woman who had the coin, she owned the coin before she lost it. In other words, this is a believer. The man who lost the sheep already owned the sheep before it was lost. These are people who have relationship with God, but have broken fellowship with God. Again, we've gone over that in our first time together. I believe we did. But they have relationship with God, but they have broken fellowship with God. And so that's what's happening with this son. He has broken fellowship, but he comes to his senses and he repents. He comes back into fellowship with the father. And we read these words. The father has run out to greet him. And it says, bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. So there's a feast. And the they is the people of the community. The people of the community is the immediate family, the workers, and the people in the community. They are all celebrating the return of the Son, the restored fellowship that the Father now has with the Son. So again, the entire village celebrated. It was the happiest day of the Father's life because his Son had come back. So that's where we have the story. Now we're going to focus on the older brother. And we're going to say, did the older brother do any of these things that the younger brother did? And if so, how? So that's what we're going to start focusing in on now in the rest of this parable, the next few verses. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. Again, the whole village was there. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he, the older son, was angry and refused to go in. He refused to go in. So which one of these, I'll ask this as a question. You'll need to unmute yourself. Which one of these is the older brother doing? Wanting to be in control, displeased with his father? Well, first off, can you all see the current slide or not?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, you can see.
All right. So which one of these did the older son violate or do?
He is displeased with the father.
Good. What else?
Publicly humiliate his father.
Why publicly? You're absolutely right, but why?
Because the rest of the people were inside celebrating the other son, yet he was outside and refused to go inside. So it seems like he was humiliating his father.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. You're 100% right. Anything else? So he wanted to be in control. And he rebels against his father. Let me back that up a slide. Sorry. He rebels against his father, and he does publicly humiliate the father. He's going to do that again. But he wanted to be in control like the younger son, and he rebels against his father while he is there. All right? So, first off, here's something that we can learn with people inside the church. Older brothers can get angry with God, and they basically say, why doesn't he do things my way? Why doesn't God do things my way? George, how could that apply to your ministry?
Well, I want money, a lot of it, to be able to do a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but he seems to take his time, like.
Yep.
So I don't know why he's not doing things my way. Yeah.
Exactly. Anybody else? How can somebody in the church, maybe it's not you personally, but have you seen other people in the church get angry with God because he didn't do things their way? Can anybody give an example?
Yes, we have a lot of examples when it comes to tithing, because most of people tithe expecting instant miracles, or rather instant results. So when the aspect of where they lack patience, so this question comes into play.
Good, good, excellent. What else? What about praying for the sick? Praying for a healing? Yeah, if God doesn't do it in the timing that I want it, we can get angry with God. So lots of examples. We're going to stop it right there, but lots of examples of when they get angry with God because they didn't get the job, they didn't get the promotion, their friend stabbed them in the back, their Christian friends stabbed them in the back, this and this and this happened, and so they get angry with God. Older brothers, people inside the church, can be angry with God, just as the prodigal son could be angry with God. Okay. Luke chapter 15, verse 28, his father came out and entreated him. Key words, he came out, which meant the father, everybody saw the father leaving the party, and they realized what was going on. It was a public humiliation of the father. A public humiliation of the father. Older brothers that can easily stain. I'm sorry, I don't know why those two letters aren't there. They can stain God's reputation. How have you guys seen people inside the church stain God's reputation? Give me some examples. Come on, some of you have to have examples.
Maybe when it comes to money, money is collected and then it's supposed to do development in the church, but it goes to someone's pocket. And that's it.
It goes to the pastor's pocket. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have any of you heard of elders raping girls in the church?
Yeah.
Yep. I've heard of it in Kenya. My friend had it happen to her, my Kenyan friend. That elder stained God's reputation. And it causes that person to really struggle with God. Yeah. Stealing money, sexual abuse. How about verbal abuse? How many of you have seen verbal abuse inside the church? Who does it usually come from?
Mostly from the pulpit, from leaders.
Yep. Pastors, elders who are verbally abusing people. Good. Any other examples from anybody? Okay, let's keep going. Those are examples from America. We'll go on to Luke 15, verse 29. But he answered his father, look. What's he doing? Basically, he's privately disrespecting his father. He's privately disrespecting his father. Look, for these many years, I have been slaving for you. Slaving for you. Slaving for you means basically his relationship to his father was made up of rules conforming to tradition. It wasn't about fellowship with the father. It was about rules that they had to keep, that they had to do. How do you guys, how do you see that inside the Church of Kenya, inside your churches? What rules have to be kept up in order to keep in good standing with the rest of the church?
There are churches where you cannot approach the altar. You
Good.
cannot pass a certain point in the church to go near the pastor.
Wow. Good.
Yeah.
What else?
There are churches that you have to kneel or bow before speaking to the man of God.
Oh, wow. That's very unbiblical to my knowledge.
Just to add to what Rose said, that there are churches where you call the pastor and the pastor's wife mom and dad. But now, if you say it in Swahili, the local language, it's mama and papa.
Okay. Good. What other rules? Any other rules? Are you allowed to bring homosexuals into the church? Yes or no?
No, in Kenya, no, unless something else is different.
Yeah.
It's not something rated, yeah.
Certain people you can bring, certain people you can't. What about if you dress incorrectly?
In some churches, you'll be kicked out.
Yeah, you'll be kicked out because you're not dressed correctly.
Yes.
There are so many rules. And this is what the older son was doing. I have been slaving for you. I have been keeping all of the commandments. I dressed right. I kneeled before you every time I spoke, Pastor. I called you mama. I called you papa. I tried to show you respect. I tithed more money when you asked for more money. I did all of these things, and you're not blessing me the way you're supposed to bless me. And their relationship with God, we're going to find out, was far more a business contract than it was an interpersonal relationship. It was a business contract. The person in the church thought, if I do A, B, and C, I should get D, E, and F. If I go to church every Sunday, if I sing in the choir, if I help out in the nursery, then God is going to get me the man of my dreams, a good job, a better car, whatever it may be. They're going to get me these things. And it's a business contract, not a relationship. They have not yielded everything to God. Let's keep going with the text. He answered and said to his father, look, for these many years I have been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed your command. Words to characterize the older brother would be very self-disciplined, very moral, very self-righteous, works done in duty, and prideful. Prideful. So what kept the older brother alienated from the father? So that broken fellowship. What kept the older brother, what keeps some people in the church alienated from their father is not their sin, but it's their pride in keeping his commands. Pride in keeping God's commands. Sorry, I don't know why that text is so big. Yeah, keeping his works. So again, this is very, very kind of key to try to understand. There are people inside the church. I don't know why I have to keep admitting these people in. There are people inside the church who are alienated from God. They have broken fellowship with God, and it's not their sins, it's their pride in keeping God's works. I have never disobeyed your commands. There's no sense of repentance on attitudes of the heart, sinful little prideful things of the heart. No, I've never disobeyed your commands. And so that is what is keeping them in broken fellowship with God. So once again, alienated from the Father. Luke 15:29 again, but he answered his father, look, for these many years I have been slaving for you. I have never disobeyed your commandments. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. All right, where's his focus? Oh, well, let's back up a second. Older brothers question God when things don't go their way. Older brothers question God when things don't go their way. And they're focused on themselves. They're focused on themselves rather than their relationship with the Father. So once again, they're focused on themselves and they wanted to be in control. And they're displeased with the Father. Going on down to verse 30. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Key words, has devoured your property. Remember, Dad, you had to sell off a third of your land to give him his inheritance. You sold it off. What's the son thinking? The older brother questions God's wisdom. Older brothers question God's wisdom. God, why did you do this way? Why did you allow my mother to die? Why did you allow my friend to die? Why did you allow this person to get sick? Why didn't you provide the job? Why did the baby have to die? God, why? Older brothers question God's wisdom. Now, he said, when the son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Key words, killed the fatted calf. Why was he worried about the fact that he killed the fatted calf? Well, remember, the entire village was there celebrating. That meant a lot of food. That meant a lot of food, a lot of people to feed. And if before he had 2/3, so the older brother got 2/3 of the inheritance, now a chunk of his inheritance just got taken out with that party. And the older prodigal son is saying, look, I don't have as much as I had before. My brother's repentance has caused me to have less of my inheritance. And he's ticked off. He's mad. The older brother is more worried about his inheritance than he is worried about his father or his brother. God, why are you allowing this to happen? His heart was on worldly things. Give me examples of that in churches in Kenya, somebody.
Well, for example, when we think about church projects and how pastors immerse themselves more in church projects, as if they elevate church projects more than the preaching, more than discipleship, more than winning souls or reaching those who haven't had the gospel. Because you will find a pastor who is raising 5 million to buy land, and he's not raising funds for discipleship or mentorship or reaching out to the unreached communities. I think we are more concerned about what we want to build and how the church, the project will look like, the land will look like. And I think that's a major problem in our country today.
Good. Give me another example.
I think I'll say when the pastor is so concentrated on tithing, and he complains that he or she complains that the tithing percentage has decreased, yet he does not care about the members. Maybe there are some who are jobless, there are some who are undergoing issues. There's a lot of pending projects in the church, and he doesn't want to foresee on that. He's just complaining, or rather raising concerns about the tithing going down, and yet he's not concerned about the members' affairs.
Excellent example. Good. Anybody else?
I think when the pastor is more concerned about his outward look, meaning the shoes he wears, the suits he wears, where he lives, whether he's not living in the leafy suburbs, rather than being concerned about the kingdom of God.
Excellent. Excellent, Joy. Yeah. There are many pastors who are pastoring for their own self-image. They're not pastoring for God's kingdom. And they're more worried about their church standing in the denomination than they are worried about establishing God's kingdom on the earth. So yes, totally agree with you. When the heart is on worldly things, the worldly things is not necessarily bigger homes, bigger cars. It could be your own pride, your own standing, your own position within inside the church, within inside the denomination. And that is, again, a worldly thing as well. So this young prodigal son, the older brother, wanted God's blessings more than he wanted God. Okay, that is so key. They want God's blessings more than they want God. So you find out that everything that is on the left that was done by the younger prodigal son who took his inheritance and squandered it on prostitutes and worldly living, the older son did, but he did it inside the church. Hearts were on worldly things, focused on themselves, alienated from the Father. Both sought happiness in wealth, not in the love of their Father. They both sought their happiness in wealth, not in the love of their Father. And some of the examples you've given of pastors, you've got to call me or say these certain words, in order to get my attention. You've got to call me by this name. You've got to call me man of God. They're seeking their happiness in their prestige, their pride. They're not in the love of God. Not in the love of God. And both the older son and the younger son were alienated. They had broken fellowship with God. So, why did Jesus talk about both sons? In this scenario, in this parable, he talks about the prodigal sons, not the prodigal son. Why? The answer is found in verses 1 and 2. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Jesus had two basic audiences: the tax collectors and the sinners. First off, the tax collectors were seen as the worst of all the sinners. They were the worst of the worst because they would be the ones who would take the taxes from their fellow Jews and charge them more than what they had to in order to put money in their own pockets. So they were considered the worst of the worst Jews. So you had the worst of the worst plus sinners. And the other side, you had Pharisees and teachers of the law who were self-righteous. So Jesus had both of these people who were listening to him, so he gave the parable of the prodigal sons. So the tax collectors and the sinners were the prodigal son. The Pharisees and the teachers were the older brother. That's why Jesus addressed both of them. And so the parable of the two prodigal sons helps us to see that Jesus redefined separation from God. So when we think of separation from God, usually if we're so focused on saving souls from hell, we say, oh, separation from God is a person going to hell. And I say, no. This is talking about broken fellowship. People who have broken fellowship. And we can be self-centered. These are so key, men and women. Again, you're going to get the PowerPoint, so you'll want to write, but you can write it down right now. We can be self-centered by breaking all the rules outside the church to get things. Or we can be self-centered by keeping all the rules inside the church to get God's blessings. I hope this sinks in. We can be self-centered by breaking all the rules outside the church. We think, oh, those are all non-Christians, but no. These can be people who've been burned by the church. You and I all know people who have been burned by the church and have left the church. There can be self-centered people by breaking all the rules outside the church, or there can be self-centered people by keeping all the rules inside the church. Breaking the rules outside or keeping the rules inside, both can result in broken fellowship with God. All right, which brings us back to the next parable, or the next danger, but we're going to pass on that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Give me some feedback. We've got about 10 minutes. Diana, I'll just go to the top of my screen. What impacted you the most there?
What impacted me the most is that even though like most of the examples that we have given is about the church, some of these things also translate in our lives, the way we are prideful of the things that we do outside the church or inside the church.
Good. Felix.
So for me, I've learned about that the church, most people don't understand what it truly means to be a Christian, and they have been guided by these doctrines that most of them, just as we've discussed, as we have reflected on the prodigal son, some of these doctrines, they have been misleading Christians on the true aspect of the love of God. So that is why you find even in churches, you find some pastors saying that if you want to receive healing, if you want God to do this for you, there's something that will cost you. But God tells us in his book that his grace is sufficient, and that through this lesson about the prodigal son, that it is only by faith alone, it is by grace alone, nothing else, not money, not anything, that God saves you. He saves you by grace alone. He saves you by faith alone. You don't have to remove anything. You don't have to give out anything, because his grace is sufficient and he gives it freely without expecting anything from you. All he expects from you is that you love him. And if he's given you the gift to serve him, you serve him in diligence. Just like the prodigal son, God doesn't exclude anyone. He took as you have seen, the prodigal son, the father returned him even after he went away, and he went for the pleasures of the world. He went astray. Still, the father came back. When the son came back, the father himself, he received him and even threw a feast. So what does that tell you? That God is very happy when someone comes together in his presence and comes back together, and even they rejoice back in the kingdom that this person has come to Jesus. Yeah, so that's what I've learned.
Good job, Felix. Ken, what about you? Lindsay, you're after Ken.
Yes, from my end, actually, this was a good lesson because I see both sons had access. And from our end as believers of the body of Christ, we have access to God while in church. So what happens? So in the event whereby we try to search or rather correct members that are going wrong, we lose ourselves. For instance, the last part we have seen, the self-centeredness. The other son, the oldest son, lost everything. They are just the same, only that the roles changed. So from my end, I can say, in the search that we are trying to search for something else, we lose ourselves in it.
Good. Lindsay. Agnes, you're next.
I have learned that both the prodigal sons, the younger one and the older one, both have the same characteristics, albeit in a different environment. So in church, for those of us who are in church, We tend to judge those who don't come to church. We tend to see them as sinners. And when God blesses them, we tend to get angry, thinking, why is He blessing them before us? And we have always been in church, we've always served you. So, yeah, that's what I've learned, that we in church are self righteous. We are basically like the older brother and the Pharisees. So, yeah.
Excellent, Lindsay. Agnes, and then Joy, you're next. Okay, Joy, you want to unmute yourself, Joy, and then.
Okay, I think I'll add to what Lindsay has said. Personally, I've really reflected. I am a real prodigal son. I judge people.
Thanks for being honest.
So it's a teaching, but for me personally, it's a teaching for myself. So it's really easy to judge other people, especially those people who don't come to church, those who've not accepted Christ. You think you're self-righteous, you think you're better than them, you think you're God's favorite and not them. And then you start wondering why they're being blessed more than you. And then you start asking God questions. But at the end of the day, we are still sitting. We're all prodigal sons. So we need to repent more than judge. Yes.
Good. Rosette.
I've learned that self-centeredness is actually not doing bad things, or rather doing things that are not good. But self-centeredness can also be you doing something that is good, or you going by the rules, but for the benefit of other things.
Good. Excellent. Roy Smith. Roy. Unmute Roy. Okay, Francis.
Okay, I've learned that where in life, like being fruitful doesn't mean like doing things that what I define as sin. And now I get to understand what all sin college to we may try to justify our actions and think that and I will go back. We have this better and also to like why we can go why we think to follow we are going
Okay, Francis, I'm just muted you. Your connection is so bad. I couldn't hear hardly anything. I just got every other word. So we're going to pass on you. Agnes, I thought we got you, but maybe not. Do you want to share anything, Agnes? Okay, George, what'd you learn?
Well, I learned new things actually. There's a time I preached a sermon that was titled The Prodigal Church. Many years ago, I was still very young. I wish I had known these lessons, but I loved how you did a comparison between the two sons, because most of the times we only focus on the one son who left. And this is a sermon that is preached many times on restoration, the power of restoration, the power of acceptance. Those are some of the titles that many pastors give it. But I've never had anyone really talk about the other son, the way you have brought him out. They always say, oh, the other son was jealous, the other son was angry, which is okay. But I have never looked at it that both of them were actually prodigal sons. The same things that the son who left are the same things that the son who remained did. So they were both on the wrong. And I think that comparison brings out a lot of aspects on the issues that we are facing as believers. And I also love the way you've used the home as a church. One has done these things outside the church, the other one has done them in the church. And I think that's a perfect analogy, which I will begin to use even from today. Then I will also reflect on myself and see which son I am. Am I the one who left? Am I the one who is in the church? And what is driving me? What is driving me to pray? What is driving me to serve God? Those are reflections that I will start doing. So thank you.
Good.
Mm.
Okay, listen, for our next time together, I'm going to share the screen again. I want you to do some homework. And so what I want you to do is to go to, on your internet browser, I want you to go to Maturing on YouTube. So you're going to go to YouTube and you're going to type in Maturing the Bride. And you're going to find this set here, Maturing the Bride, this round logo, circular logo called Maturing the Bride. Again, it's on YouTube. It's not, there are two sets, but this is the one you want, Maturing the Bride. And I want you to go over book 1, chapter 1, and chapter 2. Book 1, chapter 1, and chapter 2. So you just click on it. Up comes the lecture.
Eternal love.
And you start at the very beginning. And you're just going to watch that whole, you're going to watch a whole series there called Maturing the Bride.
Hi.
And then instead of me teaching, I want you to take notes and then we can talk about it. And so that way we'll get a lot of good reflection time, but you need to do homework. It's 2 half-hour messages, so it's going to take an hour of your time over the week. There are, I believe, notes or at least a book that you can even download if you want, so you could read it if you wanted to. But do that for next week. We're going to start Maturing the Bride, book 1, lecture 1, and we will go from there. Okay, anybody got any questions? Is that clear, George? You can send that out to everybody?
Yes, that's clear.
Good. Any questions, last comments before we go? All right, I'll be sending you this recording, George, in a few minutes. Thank you, everybody, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You guys have a good evening.